Hey guys, this is Sarah with Raven's Crochet. Welcome back to my channel. I'm going to show you a tutorial on how to do the C2C corner to corner stitch. I'm going to show you the way I do it because I think it just has a better effect. You've got smaller gaps in your project and it saves yarn. So I'm using, just to sample this, I'm going to make a washcloth and just see how the pattern turns out. Or this could be a hand towel. I'm using Peaches and Cream Strappy yarn. This is 100% cotton yarn. It's a 2-ounce cake, 56.7 grams, 102 yards, 93 meters. This is enough to make a face cloth or a dish towel or a little bitty hand towel. You need 2 of these if you want to make a decent sized hand towel. This colorway is called Linen, and they're $1.97 each if you find them at Walmart. Now, we all like our center pulls, so the best way to find your center pull, if it's not already sticking out, take the ball band off, loosen up your yarn, and just kind of mush it around a little bit. Then you want to find the center on both ends, kind of dig your fingers in there. Another podcaster showed me this. I thought it was awesome. You just kind of dig around for the center, make sure there's a lot of space in there, and then we're just going to randomly pick the most center strand that we can feel, and you're more than likely going to have yarn barf unless you get lucky and just find the end. Whichever side it comes out easiest, it really doesn't matter which end you pull it from. That's not the center. Let's see. I'm not really finding a piece that's going to be too loose, but we're just going to have yarn barf. So when you get one strand like that from your skein, you know you've got the end somewhere, so we just got to find it over here. Ah, there it is. Okay, so we don't need the ball band anymore. That's trash. I've got tons of these. So just going to yarn over my loops and into my hand and just work. Now this calls for a 5mm hook, but I can't find my 5mm. I've got them in like 2 different project bags. And so we're just going to use a 5.5. You can use a 4.5 if you want smaller gaps, but anywhere between a 4.5 and a 5.5 will work with this. So I'm just going to start my chain here. I'm going to chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Double crochet in the 3rd chain from hook. Let's make that loop smaller. Okay, so yarn over, count back. The loop on your hook does not count. So there's 1, 2, here's the 3rd one. Yarn over, and I go underneath 2 loops. This will help make the gaps in your project smaller. Do your double crochet. We got 2 chains left. We're going to do 2 more double crochets, 1 in each of these chains. This project you will need to know how to do your chaining, of course. Slip stitches and double crochets is pretty much all you need. There's the last one. Okay, so this is our first block right here. Now obviously for a washcloth or a dish towel or whatever, this hook is way too big. So me personally, I would use a 4.5mm hook. So you know what, I'm just going to grab one real quick. Trial and error, guys. This happens to all of us crocheters. Oh, there's a 4.5 right there. We're going to use that one instead. Okay, so start another block here. Alright, we've got our loop on our hook, chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Excuse me. Okay, so these last 3 chains, we're going to put 1 double crochet in each of one of those. 1, 2, and 3. I don't know if I can get it in there. This part is a little tricky. Anytime you're initially first starting a project, it is a little tricky. You just got to get to know your yarn and how to hold your hook and everything. Okay, so that's much better. Those gaps are much smaller. So this is going to be your bottom corner of your project, and we're going to be working up this way diagonally. until your project gets bigger and bigger, and each and every row you will have one extra block. So we've made our first block. We're going to chain 5 to start the next block. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is pretty much the beginning of every single row. You will chain 5 to make your first block, and you'll slip stitch over to make your second block, and I'll show you here how. I'll show you here now. There we go. If I can talk today. Okay, so again, just like we did in this first block, we are going to skip the first 2 chains and put a double crochet in the 3rd chain from our hook. And I like to go underneath 2 loops, and it's your preference here. You can go underneath 1 loop or 2 loops, but I like 2 because it keeps the gaps smaller in the project. There's the second double crochet. We need 1 more double crochet. Okay, so here's where people can get confused. Make sure you leave your tail here so you know where you started. We're going to flip this up, and we are going to slip stitch into the chain space. Here's the chain 2 space right here where we started. We are just going to slip stitch right in there around the whole entire chain. Pull through and then pull through. There's a slip stitch. So here's what your project will look like at this point. You've got your first block and your second block. We will put a block here, and then we will start our next row. So this pattern will be worked in the diagonal, which has a gorgeous effect, especially if you are working with a striped yarn. So for our next block in the row, we're only going to chain 2. Some people chain 3, but to me, I like chaining just 2 because, again, it keeps the gaps smaller. So we are going to do 3 double crochets right there in that space around this chain post. That's the chain 2 space that we did. We skipped those 2 chains, and then we double crocheted in these 3. And we're going to do our 3 double crochets right here. Okay, so there's what your project will look like so far. Now don't worry about your first block if it looks a little gappy. As soon as you continue, as you continue working along, going back and forth diagonally, this will decrease in size, especially if you put a border on, which to me, I like to put borders on these because it just gives it a cleaner edge. Okay, so we've done our second row, so now we're going to do our third row. We're going to chain 5, double crochet in the 3rd chain from hook, and 2 more double crochets in these last 2 chains. And once you get going on these rows, double crocheting into those chains will become very easy. Okay, so we're going to flip this back up like that. We're going to slip stitch. There's our 3 double crochets in that last block. 1, 2, 3, and there's our chain 2. We're going to slip stitch right there in that space. Pull through and then pull through. Chain 2. And do 3 double crochets in that space around that chain. 1, 2, 3. And get some more yarn slack. And then we are going to slip stitch in the top of this block around the chain space. You don't have to go through any stitches or anything. So pull through and pull through. Chain 2 for your last block on this row, and we're going to do 3 more double crochets around that chain post. 1, 2, 3. And then there you have 3 rows done. 1, 2, 3. So on each start of every row, you're going to chain 5 and do 3 double crochets in those last 3 chains. If your work gets twisted, lay it flat so that you can get a better understanding of where you're at. Stop and pause the video as you see fit so that way you can keep up. And I'm just going to continue working these double crochets and making these blocks. Slip stitching again into the next block. And sometimes it helps to fold this last little block downwards so that it doesn't get in the way of your crochet hook. chain 2, double crochet 3 times, oops, around that chain post. Need some more yarn. 2, 3, slip stitch into that chaining space right there, just around it. Pull through and pull through. Now, you can get confused here too, so pay attention to this. When you slip stitch into your last block, don't chain 5. Make sure you double crochet your last block here. I know this can sometimes look like a complete row, and even I have made this mistake. To chain 5 and start my next block, and then I was way off. And you'll be able to tell if you mess up, and you'll have to frog your work and go back, which is fine. Trial and error happens with everything. So just make sure you do your last block. And here's how you'll know if you've done it or not. You see, this was worked in the, on the back side. This is the back side. See, every time you start a row, you'll be flipping your work over. So you'll go back and forth, back and forth. So there's the blocks from the previous row. We have 3 blocks. In this current row, we have 1, 2, 3. So we know we need at least 1 more block. Each row, you're going to have 1 extra block. So that's another indicator of it being done or not. So chain 2 and do 3 double crochets to continue this row and finish this block. Now see the difference? We've got 1, 2, 3 rows, 4 rows, 4 blocks. So whatever row you're on, that's how many blocks you're going to have. I'll do it one more time with you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at the beginning of each row. Double crochet in the 3rd chain from hook, and the 4th chain from hook, and into the 5th chain from hook, and then flip your work, and then slip stitch into that chain 2. Not into a stitch, but just around that post. Right into it, slip stitch, and then chain 2 to do your next block. Get some more yarn. And continue on. 3 double crochets right here. Slip stitch, chain 2, that one's finished. Let's slip stitch into the next one. I think this pattern is so fun. It's almost like working a staircase. I think it's pretty cool. I love this pattern. Then make sure you get the chain post, not a double crochet. You want to work around the chain post. Right there. Chain 2 and 3 more double crochet to finish this block. And there is 5 rows. So you will just keep going until you have this project as wide as you want to. I'll go ahead and show you how to decrease here too. Decreasing is just as easy, but can be a little tricky when you're first starting out. So say we only want 5 rows. We're going to start decreasing now. We're going to turn our work. We need to start from right here where this chain 2 is. We always work around these chain 2 gaps, and these 3 are the double crochets, and then the chain 2 gap. So we need to start right here. So we need a slip stitch over there. I immediately go into, let's see, you can turn this over a little bit so you can see your chains. You got a chain here, you've got a chain there, and then there's the starting chain of the block that we're going to be working around. This one here I skip. So you got 1, 2, 3, and then the chain 2 bar. I always skip this one, the one that your loop is coming out of, right there. You see how your loop is coming out of that one? I always skip that one because we're already right there at that point. So I just go immediately into this next loop. Make sure you've got 2 loops on your hook. Slip stitch, pull through and pull through. And to your next one, make sure you've got 2 loops on your hook. Pull through and pull through. And then into your chain 2 bar, you want to slip stitch. So slip stitch 3 times. And now we're going to chain 2 to start our block. 1, 2, 3. Slip stitch onto the next block. Here, I'll go ahead and lay this out so you guys can see where I'm at. So we've slip stitched 3 times, 1, 2, 3, then we chained 2 and we did our 3 double crochet to make that block, and we just slip stitched into the top of the second block. So we're going to continue making our blocks. Chain 2, 3 double crochet, and up the ladder or staircase, and chain 2 again and make your next block. Chain 2, make your next block. 1 double crochet, 2, and 3. Oops, I have a knot. There we go. We need 1 more double crochet here. Okay, and slip stitch into the top of this bar or block. Now again, here I'm already making a mistake. We're decreasing, and here I've already started to chain to make another block. So let me go back. We are going to slip stitch in here. Then now we don't want to increase this size. Remember, it's as wide as we want it to be, so now we are decreasing. We are going to turn over. This is where it can be confusing, because when you're working your rows to make this bigger, your initial thought is to put a block on there. So that's what I was going with. But we are decreasing, so we never want to put a block on top of this previous block from the previous row. As soon as you join your new block with the old block here, you want to just turn your work. We are going to slip stitch 3 times. We've got 1 loop here. Make sure you've got 2 loops on your hook, the front and back loops. And slip stitch. 1 slip stitch. 2 slip stitches. And then there's your chain 2 post right there. There's your 3 double crochets in that block. There's your chain 2 post. We're going to slip stitch into that. And now we are ready to work the block for this space right here. So chain 2 and do 3 double crochets to make that block. Slip stitch into the next one. Chain 2 and work your next block. Chain 2, work your next block. 1, 2, and 3. Slip stitch. Okay, so here we're at the edge again. So now we're going to turn our work, and we're going to do 3 slip stitches to start our next block. So I always skip this first one here. That's your loop is coming out of. You go into the next one, make sure you've got 2 loops on your hook, and slip stitch. The next one, and then slip stitch. So we're essentially doing a slip stitch on top of the middle and the 3rd double crochet. We're skipping this first one because that's pretty much really close to where a loop came out of from slip stitching these 2 blocks together. So slip stitch on top of those 2 double crochets, and then into your chain 2 post right there, slip stitch around that. And now we're ready to start our next block. So chain 2 and 3 double crochet. Slip stitch, chain 2, and do your last block for this row. Slip stitch into the top of this block. So now that row's done. Now we've got 1 more block to do, which means we also have 1 more row to do. So we are also going to flip our work here and slip stitch. We're going to skip this first double crochet, go into the top of this next double crochet. Oops. Make sure you only have 2 loops on your hook, and slip stitch. 2 loops on the next one, slip stitch. and then slip stitch around that chain 2 post right there. Okay, chain 2, and you can work your next block, which in this sample piece, this will be the last block. And then slip stitch. Now it does look a little wonky, but it will even out as you do a border around this. Now if you're just practicing this stitch, I recommend using this type of cotton yarn. You can use 100% cotton, you can use a 50-50 blend, or what's best is a regular 4 worsted weight acrylic yarn. And that's actually the yarn that I started off with. I started using Red Heart when I first learned to crochet. But as you do a border around this, this will even out. Preferably on a bigger piece than this. This is just a sample swatch. So go ahead and do your sample swatch. See if it's a pattern that you would like for your blanket or your scarf or whatever you're making. Use a smaller hook if you want to. Instead of doing double crochets, if you want to, you can also do half double crochets to make the gaps smaller. But yeah, there are going to be some gaps in this, so just make sure you are using this pattern on a project that you would like. So if you want to do a border, it always ends kind of not at the corner, but like on the side of the work, which is fine. You can always turn your work and you can slip stitch to the corner if you prefer, but I don't. I just chain 1, and I do 2 single crochets on top of each block. 2 single crochets. And then I go 2 single crochets. I kind of go in between these gaps here, but you really want to make sure you're only getting 2 loops on your hook, so that way you're not putting more gaps into your work. So I just kind of, you just got to find a space where your hook will go through. It doesn't really matter where. Just make sure your single crochets are evenly spaced. I just put 2 single crochets on top of each block, and then I continue on. Put 2 single crochets on the top of that one, and then 2 single crochets here, and then when I get to the corner, I do 3 single crochets in that corner. And what you also could do is take a smaller hook, like once you get the body of your work done, I'm using a 4.5, you can go down to a 4mm hook if you want to, and you can do your border with the 4mm hook. Some people do that, and that's okay. It just depends on all personal preference. Now I'm just kind of fiddling with this, trying to find 2 loops to go through. And I'm not really having success getting in there where I want. This is where a darning needle will come in handy. You can poke your darning needle through there and you can kind of wiggle it around, and you can make the space a little bit wider for your hook to go through. And you see how that's going to finish up that edge? And then you'll know when you come back around that this is your starting, and you can just slip stitch right into there to complete your border. But I do 3 single crochets right here in this corner. It's a little tight, but like I said, you can use a smaller hook if you want to make it easier. And then I continue going around. There's a chain 2 right there. I can work around that. And then I continue going around. Make sure you got 2 loops though, because if you only have 1 loop, you're going to make larger gaps in your project around the border. And you just keep going around. 2 single crochets on top of each block that you're going around. And I just pick randomly 2 loops, not all 3, just 2. Thank you. Alright, actually, hang on, I made a mistake. I did not complete that single crochet. Huh. This yarn does split, as you can tell. But when you're working the body of your project, I have no issues with the splitting. It can be a little tricky on the border if you're using the same yarn. So just take your time, go slow with it, and with practice you will get the end result that you were looking for. So this kind of tightens up your work a little bit, which I like. And so once I go around the entire thing, it'll be better. Now, if I wanted to, I could take all this out, frog the entire thing. I can start all over, which is fine. I've had to do that many times. It's part of trial and error with practice. But I'm going to leave it here for now. I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial, and I hope it helps you for the main thing. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. If you have any suggestions or ideas or projects that you think would go well with this pattern, please leave that in the comments below too, so other people also have ideas. And I hope this tutorial is better than my last one. I've had to find something to raise up my platform that this phone is attached to, so that way I had enough space for my hands to work without the camera automatically zooming in and out. So I've got the camera zoomed in just a little bit, so that way you can see just my table space here and not all my mess that's around both sides here on the floor. But anyways, so far so good. So I hope everyone is having a great week, and happy crocheting, guys. I hope this pattern works for you, and I hope you like it. Bye, guys.